The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And your Niagara Frontier radio reading service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, August 24th. And your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And if you wanted to have the Four Seasons there, this week, we've got a very brisk, cool morning today. And it's going to be cloudy with some sun today, a couple of thunderstorms, brisk and cool. Any downpour can produce gusty winds and small hail. The high today will be only 63. There'll be a couple of showers tonight with a low of 59. Warmer tomorrow with a passing shower and a high of 72. And Wednesday, clouds and sun and a little bit warmer up to 77. The normal high and low for today are 78 and 61. The record high was 90 in 1959, and the record low was 46 in 1952. And last year, we had a high of 80 and a low of 61 degrees. Today's pollen is high, so be a little aware of that if you're having any allergy problems. The weather trivia for today is this: are hurricane names ever repeated? And the answer is yes, but not in the same year. So you have to wait a couple of years until it comes back for us. Now, what do we have in the news today, Ed?
Well, we'll start off by saying, with the weather report, as they say about Buffalo, if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes and it'll change.
That's true today.
Well, today's unusual on the front page of today's Buffalo News because we have a column by sports writer Lance Lasowski, and his headline is, "Allen reflects on Oliver's loss. All we can do is love on him." As soon as his head coach's news conference ended Saturday evening, Josh Allen stepped into an equipment room adjacent to the Buffalo Bills locker room inside Huntington Bank Field and waited for a group of reporters. Allen did not play in the Bills' 31-7 victory over the Cleveland Browns in a preseason game. The impromptu interview was his idea. He was sad, he was angry, and he wanted to be the voice of his team. One of their own, defensive tackle Ed Oliver, suffered an unimaginable loss in late June when his 2-year-old son died in a drowning at his family's home in Houston. First off, I want to say thank you to the reporters who knew about it and allowed him to have his moment and his time, Allen began. It's very sad, and how it came out makes me very, very sad and angry at the same time. Obviously, very unfortunate what happened, and as a teammate of his and someone in his locker room, all we can do is love on him. There's nothing you can say to make the situation any better but accept being there for him in whatever ways he needs, and that's what we're going to continue to do. That's what teammates do. We love up on each other and try to hold each other up when we're down. I can't imagine what he's going through, but the way he's dealt with it has been very unbelievable. Very, very unfortunate how it got out. Some of the Bills players only learned about Oliver's loss late Friday, when an account on X began to share a blend of misinformation and speculation. Some reporters had pieced together the alleged events of June 28th, but none reported Oliver or his son's identity until Saturday, when NFL Network's Cameron Wolfe confirmed that Oliver is mourning the loss of his son. The Harris County Sheriff's Office in Houston announced in a Facebook post just before 10 p.m. on June 28th that a toddler had been found unresponsive in a pool earlier that evening. The toddler was taken to a local hospital where the child was pronounced dead. The sheriff's office did not provide the name, age, or gender of the child. The office also did not provide details on how the child drowned. Property records show Oliver owns a home on the block where the incident occurred, but the sheriff's office statement did not identify the address. Outlets in Houston, where Oliver starred at Westfield High School and the University of Houston, ran brief stories shortly after the incident without the child's identity. Speculation began on online message boards, fueled by a grainy video allegedly outside the home where the incident occurred. The man in the video appeared to be Oliver. The Buffalo News contacted the sheriff's office on July 29th, seeking additional information on the incident, including the name of the child, the address of the incident, the name of the property owner, and whether anyone had been criminally charged in the drowning. The sheriff's office directed the News to file a public records request with the agency. The News filed a public records request that day and submitted a second request on July 31st when the initial request was rejected on technical grounds. The sheriff's office on August 12th responded with a copy of a letter the agency had sent to the Texas Attorney General seeking permission to reject the News request. The News was unable to independently verify reports of the incident and elected not to publish a story until the Bills confirmed it. Joe Brady, the Bills' first-year coach, learned about the incident shortly after it happened. To honor Oliver's wishes, the team elected not to comment or confirm until his agency did so to Wolf. Some of Oliver's teammates, including defensive lineman and Allen, were aware. When more speculation began on social media on Friday night, the players were frustrated, confused, and infuriated. "I'm a parent," Brady said during his press conference. "Ever since I found out the news, it's really hard. I can't fathom what he's going through." There's really not words to describe those moments. As a coach, as a father, it's my job to give him what he needs from me right now, and that's loving him and giving the privacy he deserves. Whatever it looks like, no matter how someone might want to handle it, it's however he wants us to handle and going through it. Oliver did not travel with the team to Cleveland because of an undisclosed injury that's kept him off the field since the Bills' preseason game August 15th at Highmark Stadium. It's unclear when he will be healthy enough to play. No matter the timeline, Brady and his players emphasized Oliver's privacy. They do not want him to have to relive the events, nor do they want baseless speculation to occur in corners of the internet. Oliver reported to training camp with the rest of his teammates on July 28th, and he did not miss a practice until the injury occurred.
Also on today's front page, fine print doomed trade deal with U.S., Canada envoy says. The U.S.-Canada trade talks collapsed over a range of issues where the written text of a potential deal was at odds with what the Canadian side believed it had agreed to, Prime Minister Mark Carney's top U.S. envoy says. Mark Wiseman, Canada's ambassador to the United States, said in an interview Sunday that there was no one issue that led the talks to collapse late Friday, a development that triggered new tariffs and a potentially escalating trade fight. Wiseman likened the negotiations to a handshake deal to buy a house, only for the prospective buyer to learn appliances were not included, the furnace had no warranty, and neither the garage nor the yard is on the same property, and ultimately then walk away. As we drilled down, what we discovered was that our understanding of what had been agreed to was quite different from what was showing up in the documents, he said. When that kind of thing happens once or twice, it's kind of understandable. But when it happens consistently and every interpretation is the most negative interpretation, then it got to a point where they walked away. Wiseman's comments come as the countries grapple with the sudden, jarring collapse of trade talks on Friday. The U.S. proceeded to apply a 50% tariff on about $20 billion worth of Canadian goods, and Carney announced retaliation that will take effect on September 8th. The U.S. is pledging to escalate if he proceeds. It's not clear whether negotiations will take place between now and then, but Wiseman said the timetable is not about creating an overtime period for talks. I don't think it should be viewed that way, he said. talks were bogged down in particular on a dispute over tariff treatment of medium and heavy vehicles, on which the U.S. was resisting cutting tariffs. Wiseman said Canada needed medium and heavy-duty vehicles to be included in the tariff relief. The issue affects General Motors and Ford, two U.S. automakers who are operating in Canada, he said. That's just something we could not accept, because we want to protect the existence of an automotive assembly industry in Canada for cars, light trucks, medium trucks, and also heavy-duty trucks. But he added, this is not why the deal fell apart. That is a very specific example of one of a number of things where, as the interpretation of the details became clearer, it became obvious that there wasn't going to be a meeting of the minds. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said the deal would have offered Canada tariff reductions in steel, aluminum, automobiles, and lumber, but blamed Canada for walking away. Carney said he walked away when the U.S. demands became too great. Greer told the New York Times on Saturday that the deal would have cut the majority of Canadian steel exports to a 25% tariff up to a quota, with anything above that remaining at 50%. The U.S. would have lowered the aluminum tariff to 25% without a quota. It also would have cut the tariff on passenger vehicles, suspended the since enacted tariffs, and eliminated a lumber tariff. Wiseman, asked to confirm that, declined to get into details, but called it broadly accurate. We're disappointed, he said. We worked hard, but at the end of the day, the terms that were put forward on a deadline that was created by the United States just didn't work for us. Carney said the U.S. demanded that Canada constrain its ability to do separate trade deals with other nations. Wiseman declined to fully elaborate, saying that the matter was not with any one country, such as China, but much broader. The U.S. has changed its view of economic partnership, and in the face of that, Canada, among other things, has said that we will look to diversify, he said. So we have to ensure that any agreement we would come to with the United States does not constrain our ability to create trading relationships, open and free trading relationships with other jurisdictions. But to be clear, this was not an issue about China. Carney also said the administration was looking to curtail the use of French, one of Canada's two official languages, and a political lightning rod. Wiseman said the dispute pertained to digital services and U.S.-based streaming services and levels of French language content. Wiseman cast the matter as a red line. It's non-negotiable in terms of our ability to protect, and not just protect, but be able to enhance and grow the French language in Canada, in Quebec, and the rest of Canada, he said. Those that want to do business in Canada, be it digital or anything else, must respect that fundamental reality. Carney also said the U.S. administration was not united in its approach, signaling the Canadians were getting different dizzying messages from Greer, who is Trump's top trade official, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who oversees the so-called Section 232 sectoral tariffs that were part of the talks. U.S.-Canada ties have frayed substantially during Trump's second term, with the president pressuring Canada to become the 51st state and applying tariffs that fly in the face of the trade deal he signed in the first term, and related side letters that contain pledges Trump has since abandoned. Trump said in a social media post early Sunday that Canada wants the benefits of being a state without being one, but has otherwise said nothing since the collapse of the talks. One of his cabinet officials Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said on Fox News that Canada is foolish to think it can win a trade war with the U.S. But Trump's former vice president criticized the measure. American business and American consumers pay American tariffs, Mike Pence said on State of the Union. The last thing we need right now, as our economy is getting back on its feet, is a trade war with Canada. Pence said he would advise them to drive a hard bargain, but pursue free trade with free nations, most especially our trading partners to the north.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour. Time to turn to the editorial page, and today's editorial is headlined, Shock and Accountability, ICE's electric gloves demand strict safeguards and oversight. New York could become a legal testing ground if federal immigration officers begin using new gloves capable of delivering painful electric shocks. Attorney General Letitia James says a New Yorker injured by such a device could have a private right of action, and the state itself could take legal action. The Trump administration's plan to equip ICE officers with these gloves raises serious concerns. James and Governor Kathy Hochul are right to raise questions about the legality and appropriate use of the devices. ICE plans to spend up to $20 million on Generated Low Output Voltage Emitter, and that forms the acronym GLOVE, tools for its officers, as the News' Robert Gavin reported. The gloves are described as a, quote, conductive distraction and de-escalation device, close quote. The administration reportedly plans a no-bid procurement. As Hochul said, that appears to be on its face a violation of civil rights to cause that kind of physical harm to an individual, regardless of what the offense may be. Hochul's concern is justified. ICE officials should not deploy such a device without first demonstrating that it is safe and necessary and establishing clear limits, rigorous training, and meaningful oversight. James has suggested that the use of the gloves could prompt a legal challenge under the civil rights provisions acted as part of the state's recent $277 billion budget. Those provisions could provide a basis for suits against federal officers accused of constitutional violations. If a New Yorker is injured, James said, there will be a private right of action as well as action from the state of New York. You can best be assured of that. Republican State Senator Patrick Gallivan, a former sheriff and state police captain, said that properly trained and incorporated into the use of force continuum, the device could help officers protect public safety. Assembly member Patrick Kludzinski, a retired police lieutenant, added that less lethal force tools can reduce the need for deadly force. They raise a legitimate point. Less lethal options can both protect officers and those being taken into custody, but that makes rigorous standards governing their use more important, not less. Concerned about the devices are not merely theoretical. Fox 29 in Philadelphia reported that Omaha, Nebraska public schools asked police to stop using the gloves on students after police used the devices twice during the 2025-26 school year. That provides a real-world example of why questions about such devices should be used and against whom matter. Unlike more visible uses of force, an electric shock glove can be difficult for bystanders to recognize. If ICE deploys the devices, every use should be recorded and subject to supervisory review, with officers required to document the circumstances and why force was necessary. ICE has a legitimate need for less lethal options, but DHS should not deploy a device capable of inflicting pain without publicly providing evidence of its necessity and safety and establishing clear training requirements, permissible uses, reporting requirements, and accountability mechanisms. If an officer subsequently uses one in a manner alleged to constitute excessive force against a New Yorker, the state's new civil rights remedy deserves to be tested in court.
Today's Another Voice column is all about some of the challenges facing us as we age, and it was submitted by Drema Hyman, PhD, who is a healthcare professional, community advocate, and a researcher. And the headline is, "Growing Old with Dignity Has Become an Impossible Dream for Many." Nearly every American hopes to grow old, yet growing old with dignity has become increasingly difficult for many seniors living on a fixed income. Rising housing costs, groceries, utilities, insurance premiums, and prescription drug expenses continue to strain household budgets. For many older Americans, retirement is no longer a season of security, but one of constant financial calculation. During more than 30 years working in healthcare, long-term care, and community health, I met countless older adults who quietly made impossible choices. Some delayed filling prescriptions so that they could pay the electric bill. Others skipped meals in order to afford medication. Many worried less about themselves than about becoming a burden on their children. These are not isolated stories. They represent the reality faced by many older Americans. The conversation about Social Security should never be reduced to partisan slogans. Regardless of political affiliation, citizens cannot make informed decisions without clear, factual information from those who seek to represent them. Our elected officials should be prepared to answer straightforward questions. How will your proposal affect today's retirees? How will they affect future generations? What evidence supports your approach? Protecting older Americans is not simply about retirement checks. It's about preserving independence, reducing preventable poverty, supporting family caregivers, strengthening local communities, and affirming the dignity of people who have spent decades contributing to our nation. When older adults struggle to afford basic necessities, families often absorb additional caregiving responsibilities. Healthcare systems face greater strain. Community organizations work harder to fill widening gaps. Financial stress can increase isolation and vulnerability to exploitation. These challenges touch every generation. This is not a call to abandon fiscal responsibility. It is a call to ensure that decisions about Social Security and programs affecting older Americans are made thoughtfully, transparently, and with a full understanding of their human impact. One day, if we are fortunate, each of us will join the ranks of older Americans.
Well, next we have today's editorial cartoon, and the cartoonist is Mike Lukovich, who writes for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and it is a single-panel cartoon, and on the left-hand side of the cartoon, there is a giant alarm clock with a loud ring written above it, and on the face of the clock, it says, National Debt Clock, $40 trillion, in recognition that the U.S. national debt this past week has passed $40 trillion. However, on the right side of the panel is President Trump, and he is in a chair, and there's an American flag behind him, and it appears, in this cartoon anyway, that President Trump is asleep. His eyes are certainly closed, and his head is nodded off to the side. So that is today's editorial cartoon from Mike Lukovich. We describe, and you can decide what that means.
Well, the clock is ringing.
Yes, it is, loudly.
We turn now to our national opinion pieces, and our first one comes from Clarence Page. And the headline is, Unity and Careful Messaging Will Be the Keys to the Dems' Resurgence. Here's an easy lesson for rising political hopefuls to draw from Francesca Hong's failed bid to be Wisconsin's Democratic gubernatorial nominee. Here it is. Don't demonize Thanksgiving. Hong, a chef, state legislator, and Democratic socialist, was the clear front-runner in the Democratic primary until a social media comment she posted 6 years ago, now deleted, turned up in the way that old tweets often do to embarrass political candidates. You don't have to be a right-winger to slap your forehead, shake your head, and condemn cheap shots at a holiday long cherished by countless families, yet dismissed by Hong as a glorification of colonialism. Here we go. She backpedaled on those past remarks, but one way or another, her polling lead evaporated, and she lost to a moderate opponent, David Crowley, the Milwaukee County executive. Although Hong had campaigned on a platform that no doubt appealed to many Wisconsin voters, by the end she was beleaguered by questions about Turkey Day and whether she still believed in defunding the police. Such left-wing stars as Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York and Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont refrained from endorsing Hong, despite campaigning for other prominent progressives, including Michigan Senate nominee Abdul El-Sayed. Such hesitancy about Hong and her hot-button holiday, heat, signaled a renewed appreciation of moderated rhetoric, even among the progressives, in pursuit of restoring unity in the Democratic Party and calming the concerns of independent voters. Representative Ocasio-Cortez suggested the dawn of a new post-woke era to replace woke one, like a new model of an automobile. Woke one was crazy, she said, laughing, during a recent Sunday appearance on ABC's This Week. Translation: some Democratic candidates, including herself, were distancing themselves from extreme statements like defund the police, that were all the rage, quite literally, in the volatile context of 2020's protest over the killing of George Floyd. I think that what's important is that we have to assess what a candidate is saying now, she said. Woke 1, or 1.0 as some call it, presumably met its demise in 2024 with the re-election of Donald Trump. What Woke 2.0 looks like, or if it even exists, is not for me to say. Yet progressive candidates are learning that the woke frame continues to be a bludgeon used against them, and however pure their intentions may be, they need to formulate their positions and explain themselves to voters with care. Calls for blanket defunding of police or throwing open the doors to prisons and jails don't play so well when you're running for governor or senate or the presidency, an office that some speculate AOC has her eye on. The same message came from New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani in a later news conference. People can change and develop their beliefs, he said, adding that he too does not support problematic positions like defunding the police, although he is on record as having done so in the past. So far, Mamdani has pretty much governed in that fashion, and other progressive wing voices, wishing to avoid snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory, seem to be showing a new respect for their fellow partisans on the political ground. If they keep that up and avoid too much infighting, Democrats will be able to enjoy Trump's gift to them, his administration's seemingly endless controversies that have put his popularity ratings on the skids. For example, while Wisconsin's votes were being counted, Trump's approval rating continued its downward slide amid the interminable Iran war and its knockoff effects on the economy and affordability. A recent survey from The Economist YouGov found that only 33% of respondents said they approved of how Trump has handled his job as president. Another 62% indicated they disapproved. Yet, with the economy on so many minds, the president has famously, or should I say infamously, disparaged affordability as a con job. It's a word made up by Democrats, and oh yes, by the media to criticize him. Trump calls the Democrats dumbocrats and social democrats godless communists. And the Republicans have largely adopted this name-calling as their campaign strategy for this November. That's not exactly groundbreaking stuff. But as I always caution, it's early. With the midterms less than 3 months away, there's still time for either party to lose. And the same goes for the next presidential election in 2028, when Trump, presumably, will not be on the ballot. The Democrats would do well to remember the lessons of 1972, the first election in which I was old enough to vote. Richard Nixon was well positioned to win re-election. The economy was recovering from a recession. He was winding down the Vietnam War, and his trips to Beijing and Moscow had largely diffused the Cold War. Yet, his victory was a historic landslide in which he won more than 60% of the popular vote, which was a GOP high-water mark, and carried every state but Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. He owed this stunning result to an unexpected gift: Democratic disarray. Long story short, the Democrats had failed to patch up their differences in time. George McGovern had won the Democratic nomination on his bona fides as an anti-war liberal that inspired more traditional elements in the party, such as some labor unions and Southerners, to start an anybody but govern campaign. To win in 2028, the Democrats have to do more than wait for the current president to destroy his own presidency. They need to nominate someone without dividing themselves and destroying their own chances. Their challenge begins now.
Well, our next column comes from Jonah Goldberg, and his headline is, "Everybody is for affordability, but no candidate will deliver." He writes, "Remember the affordability mania? The time was 2025. A young, charismatic Democratic Socialist candidate for New York City mayor named Zohran Mamdani became a viral sensation. His secret? Affordability. Ask him almost anything and he turned the conversation to affordability. When a reporter asked Mamdani to respond to President Trump's claim that he was the better-looking politician, Mamdani responded, 'My focus is on the cost of living crisis, bro.' Queried about whether Hamas, the terrorist organization, should disarm, he began with, 'I believe that any future here in New York City is one that will have to make sure that's affordable for all.' Mamdani won the election, and pretty much everyone agreed that affordability was the key that unlocked City Hall. All this annoyed Trump, who campaigned on lowering prices in 2024. Affordability was a, quote, con job by the Democrats, he told reporters. Affordability is a lie when used by the Dems. We are the party of affordability, he declared on Truth Social. One of Mamdani's first priorities as mayor was to impose partial rent freeze on more than 1 million apartments, about 40% of New York's rental stock. That was temporary good news for people in those apartments, but good luck finding an economist who doesn't think this will make housing less affordable over the long term. More recently, Mamdani endorsed a plan to require Amazon and other companies to stop using third-party contractors to deliver packages to New Yorkers. It's a naked sop to the Teamsters, who've long wanted unionized drivers to have a monopoly on deliveries. If passed, The Delivery Protection Act will create some jobs for drivers while killing more jobs for gig workers. More important, it would surely make deliveries slower and more expensive. The only study estimating the costs, sponsored by its opponents, found that it would add $664 in delivery fees per household annually. Take that with a grain of salt if you like, but it's telling that the affordability-obsessed Mamdani administration didn't even bother to study the question of how this plan would affect affordability. You'd think this would be the first question they'd ask. Mamdani hasn't even mentioned improving affordability when touting the plan. It's almost as though Trump was right about affordability being a con job. My point is that populist appeals are always simplistic. They blame sinister forces for deliberately standing in the way of simple fixes. The reality is that populist promises of easy fixes are easy to make, but governing is hard and complicated. Elected officials have to balance any number of priorities and considerations that undermine simplistic slogans. The problem with populist pandering is that it always leads to disappointment with leaders who fail to deliver, which only invites more populist ire and more pandering.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 36 minutes after the hour. And in news from Washington, years of delays at the FBI's home have cost the taxpayers millions. 15 years after the federal government set out to replace the FBI's aging Washington headquarters, taxpayers are still paying to maintain the deteriorating building as construction costs rise and work on a relocation site has yet to begin. Federal officials warned Congress years ago that delays would come with a price. In 2018, the General Services Administration, which oversees federal land development projects, estimated that each additional year of inaction would add about $84 million in short-term repairs and escalating construction costs. 8 years later, the FBI remains in the J. Edgar Hoover building. Why has it taken so long depends on whom you ask. Maryland Democrats blame the Trump administration for repeatedly disrupting a project Congress deemed ready to advance. Republicans point to broader bureaucratic dysfunction and political jockeying over the headquarters. Economists and political analysts say the answer lies somewhere in between. Building a massive high-security federal facility is inherently complicated, and repeated changes in direction have made the process longer and more expensive. How much those delays have cost taxpayers, however, remains unclear. The FBI reported spending roughly $157 million on Hoover maintenance and repairs for the fiscal year 2016 through 2023. But adding government expenditures or multiplying GSA's 8-year-old estimate to calculate the price of delay would fail to account for inflation, tariffs, and the time value of money, J.P. Crail said, an accounting professor at the Loyola University of Maryland. Uncertainty is always a costly thing, he told the Baltimore Sun. GSA and the FBI did not respond to the Sun's request for spending figures covering headquarter planning and procurement, the canceled 2017 procurement, or work on the Greenbelt and Ronald Reagan building proposals. The GSA also did not provide an updated estimate of the annual cost of further delays.
Well, our next headline is recalled auto numbers accelerate as notices drop. Auto recalls affected nearly 24 million vehicles in the first half of 2026, more than doubling the number of recalled automobiles year over year, and on pace to rack up the largest total in 5 years. That's the conclusion of a study by Sedgwick that points to the growing complexity of new cars and trucks, said Chris Harvey, the Risk and Claims Administrator product recall expert. Automakers are using more common vehicle platforms, electronic components, and software across multiple models meaning a single defect can affect a much larger population of vehicles. This does not necessarily indicate a decline in vehicle quality, Harvey wrote. Rather, it reflects the interconnected nature of modern vehicle design and manufacturing, where a single issue can have far-reaching impacts. The surge in the number of vehicles recalled this year comes as even automakers are issuing fewer such notices overall, according to the study. Recent recalls have included 74,000 Dodge Durangos, 955,000 Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram vehicles, and 255,000 Ford Focus vehicles. Ford also recalled 1.4 million vehicles over a gear shift issue with 2 potentially related injuries. On Friday, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opened an investigation into 997,000 General Motors pickup trucks and SUVs over engine failure concerns. The large scale of some of these recalls is part of a broader trend, according to Sedgwick. While the number of recall events fell 6.5% in the first half of 2026, reaching a 6-year low, the number of impacted vehicles surged 111% to nearly 24 million from a little more than 11 million in the first half of 2025.
In finance news, we turn back to the front page with this headline: Buffalo Niagara stuck job market in need of a boost. The Buffalo Niagara job market remains stuck in the mud. It's not growing. Hiring softened a bit during July in tandem with a drop in hiring nationwide, and it continues its pattern of strengthening one month and weakening the next, all leading back to the same place. The region has roughly the same number of jobs that it had in May of 2025, which means 14 months without any meaningful employment growth, according to the latest state Labor Department report on Thursday. It's been a roller coaster, said Timothy Glass, the Labor Department's regional economist in Buffalo. It's been up and then down. And like every roller coaster, it has been ending up back where it started. Of course, the bright side view is that the region isn't losing jobs. The pace of layoffs has subsided, despite some big job cut and shutdown announcements earlier this year. But the country has been adding jobs over the same 14 months, and our lack of hiring hurts because it means we're missing out on the extra paychecks that are fueling consumer spending in other parts of the nation, creating a virtuous cycle where more jobs leads to more spending and eventually leads to more hiring. Which begs the question, how does Buffalo Niagara break out of its hiring slump? More people would help. It's still hard for businesses to fill the job openings that they have, let alone fill the thousands of additional positions that true prosperity would bring. Companies are reluctant to expand in places where they don't think they can attract enough workers with the skills they need to do the job, and a willingness to do it for the wages that the company is offering to pay. Our lower cost of living is a positive for the second part of that equation, but our shrinking population, which has started dropping slightly again after very modest but encouraging growth in the 2010s, is a big deterrent. We simply need more people, and that's not happening naturally, especially in an area where the median age of residents is 41. It's almost 2 years older than the national average. The population jump in the 2010s was fueled by immigrants, and that pipeline has been shut off, first by the pandemic and then a Trump administration crackdown. About 8% of the region's population was born in another country. That's about half the national average. We need immigrants to build this area as this population gets older, Glass said. More immigrants, for example, could fuel more hiring in healthcare, retail, leisure, and hospitality and construction sectors. 3 of those 4 have been growing locally over the past year, and all have struggled with worker shortages. Fixing our fractured relationship with Canada would help too. It's a big trading partner for local companies, and the tariff-related squabbles are not helping local companies. It's not helping local tourism either, the industry either, with angry Canadians staying away to protest the policies of the United States. A report prepared for the state by Tourism Economics estimated that spending by visitors in Buffalo-Niagara region was flat during 2025, a year where spending by Canadian visitors statewide plunged by 28%. Locally, passenger car border crossings through July are down nearly 13% from 2024 and are off by 4% from last year, according to Department of Transportation data. You need to see a good relationship with Canada, Glass said.
Well, a do-over is sought for proposals at the former Aud site. Former lawmaker Jacobs points to informational changes. Should New York rebid the proposed North Aud block redevelopment? That's a question downtown developer and former Representative Chris Jacobs is asking, even as Penrose LLC is poised to begin work on its $225 million venture to construct a housing project at the former Memorial Auditorium site at Canalside. The project has already been approved and funded, and state officials, from Governor Kathy Hochul to the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, have repeatedly backed the mostly affordable housing venture. They've noted that the site has been vacant for more than a decade, and waiting would only leave a gaping hole for much longer. And they say it's too late. The North Aud Block project is under construction, said Pam Lent, a spokesman for Empire State Development Corporation. But Jacobs, who insists he's not seeking the project for himself, says the project has changed so much that the state should seek new proposals for the site from developers who could assess projects on today's information. What irks me here is this is a public project and there are procurement laws the state has to follow, he said. This is not a private entity that can do whatever it wants. It's got to adhere to the laws that prevail. Specifically says, the original request for proposals referenced $10 million in state support for streets and infrastructure as part of a development project that would build housing at the Canalside site, and then sought bids to get the work done. But Penrose is getting more than $152.9 million in state funding, including both direct subsidies and tax credits, to finance a project that is now mostly workforce and affordable housing, and it's getting an unusual 30-year property tax break from the state that will likely save it millions more. That's enough of a difference of material change by legal standards that other developers might have stepped forward had they known what would be available to them, Jacobs said. If you're going to have this significant increase in money from what you originally put, it needed to be rebid, he said. To think you wouldn't have other bidders is ridiculous. Why not beat the bushes and get other developers, asked Mark Goldman, a civic advocate and business investor who runs Friends of the Buffalo Story nonprofit. I think it's being jammed down our throats, and I think we're going to regret it. We need a timeout to involve the community in the discussion.
And normally at this time we have the death listings, but there has not been for several Mondays, there are no death listings today. There is one obituary of note. Michael Wright, who is known for his on-screen roles in the 5 Heartbeats and V, has died, according to a family statement shared on social media. He died on August 19th, and he was 70 years old. If you have any questions at all about our death listings from over the weekend, you can call us at 716-821-5555. Again, that's 716-821-5555.
Well, now it's time to turn to Georgia Nichols' Royal Stars, and if today is your birthday, happy birthday. You have an intellectual desire to understand everything. You are original, observant, and artistically creative. The theme for this year is service to others, perhaps to family. Therefore, take care of yourself so that you will be able to help those who turn to you for guidance, comfort, and courage. Now, the stars show the kind of day you're going to have. 5 stars is dynamic, 4 stars is positive, 3 stars is average. Now, everybody is having a 4 and 3 star day today. However, as we go through this, listen carefully. A lot of these don't sound like 3-star days. It sounds like many of us should go back to bed. So we'll start with Aries, which is having a 3-star day. And you have important discussions with bosses, parents, VIPs, or the police. If so, agree to nothing important. Tonight you're admired. For those of us who are Taurians, we are having a 4-star day. Artists can make art and explore new ideas. Your mind is wide open, floating like a helium balloon let loose in the sky. I don't feel like a helium balloon. Tonight the word is explore. Now for Gemini, Gemini is going to have 3 stars, but Georgia says be extra careful today. Restrict your spending to food and gas. Postpone important decisions. Tonight, check your finances. For Cancer, a 3-star day. Georgia says don't agree to anything important. Get physical exercise. Do something to blow off pent-up steam that might be building up within you. Tonight, listen and cooperate. For Leo, again, 3 stars, she says, avoid important decisions. Expect shortages at work. Fortunately, your communications with others are charming, and the word for tonight is work. For Virgo, it's a 4-star day. This is a powerful time for you because the sun is in your sign, and tomorrow your ruler Mercury moves into your sign as well. Explore the arts, enjoy socializing, restrict spending to food and gas. Tonight have fun. For Libra, 3 stars, she says, this is the perfect day to schmooze and do as little as possible. Enjoy the company of others, relax with friends or cocoon at home, and tonight relax at home. For Scorpio, it's a 4-star day, but she says, delays and shortages are classic. This is a great day to socialize, but wait until tomorrow to act. Tonight there will be discussions. For Sagittarius, 3 stars, do not make financial decisions. Don't spend money for anything other than food and gas. On the other hand, it's a great day to socialize and explore creative projects. Tonight, check your money. For Capricorn, 4 stars, you might feel vaguely hesitant. There might be a dreamy quality present. However, it's a wonderful time to be creative and socialize with others, even though it's a poor time to spend money or make important decisions. So tonight, you should stay grounded. For Aquarius, 3 stars, your best approach to this day is to be low-key, or work alone or behind the scenes. Postpone important decisions. Work hard and carry on as usual. The word for tonight is privacy. And finally, for Pisces, 4 stars, this is a lovely day to schmooze with friends and members of groups. However, don't agree to anything important. Don't volunteer for anything. Explore the arts in good times, and tonight the word is friendship. And again, it sounds like the overall tenor of this might be for some people, go back to bed, pull the covers up tight, and draw the curtains.
I think I'm going to take up your advice as soon as I get home. Now it's time to take a look back in history to see what's happened on August 24th. In 1814, British troops captured Washington, D.C., and set fire to several buildings, including the Capitol and White House. A portrait of George Washington was famously saved by First Lady Dolly Madison, who instructed 15-year-old Paul Jennings to save that picture if possible. Madison allegedly refused to flee until the 8-foot portrait was unscrewed from the wall. For speed, she ordered that the frame be broken. In 1821, Spanish Viceroy Juan de Ordóñez signed the Treaty of Cordoba, granting Mexico independence from Spain. In 1949, NATO entered into force following the signing of its treaty 4 months earlier. In 1950, Judge Edith Sampson became the United States' first black representative to the United Nations. In 1968, France became the world's fifth thermonuclear power, exploding a hydrogen bomb in a test on the French Polynesia. In 1981, Mark David Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life for the murder of John Lennon. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union voted to demote Pluto to a dwarf planet. And finally, in 2011, Steve Jobs resigned as CEO of Apple, saying he could no longer meet his duties and expectations due to health issues. He died of cancer less than 2 months later.
From our political notebook, from the District of Columbia, a source says that Kushner and Jeffries have met on collaboration. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law and close advisor of President Trump, recently met with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York to discuss ways the White House can collaborate with Democrats on key issues, a source told CNN on Sunday. The pair gathered privately in New York to discuss such key issues as immigration, housing, and the cost of living, the source said. Kushner and Jeffries had previously worked together on the STEP Act, a law passed with bipartisan support in 2018 that sought to reduce the federal prison population by, among other things, easing mandatory minimum sentencing requirements for certain violations. During their meeting, which occurred several weeks ago and was first reported by the New York Times on Sunday, Kushner suggested that Jeffries should also meet with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. CNN reached out to the White House for comment on the meeting. Jeffries has emerged as the front-runner to become House Speaker if Democrats win the majority in the midterms. The party is bullish on that possibility due to Trump's sinking approval ratings amid the Iran war and economic concerns underscored by the escalating national debt, which recently topped out at $40 trillion. GOP House Speaker Mike Johnson on Sunday downplayed the notion that the meeting signaled an acknowledgement by Trump that he might have to work with the Democratic majority during the next 2 years. "I'm telling you, we're going to defy history and hold this majority," Johnson said on Fox News, explaining that Republicans see a path towards keeping their razor-thin margin over Democrats.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for August 24th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for some more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ted by Jackie.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we're turning now to the city and regional section of the paper. And our first story is headlined, Erie County to take the lead on Buffalo Police Mental Health Unit program. The Buffalo Police Department is in search of a new mental health services provider for its behavioral health team, and this time, Erie County is footing the bill. The county's Department of Mental Health will soon begin reviewing responses to a request for proposals from potential providers under a new pilot program that will see the county spend up to $500,000 for a one-year contract in support of the city police unit, which specializes in responding to calls that involve mental health crises. County officials say the program may be replicated with other departments in the future. Sarah Bunk, Commissioner of the Erie County Department of Mental Health, said with encouragement of County Executive Mark Poloncarz that she made it a priority to find funding to get the program off the ground again, with the hope that if it is successful, the city can find funding to continue supporting it and the model can be replicated in other communities in the county. We want to use county tax dollars to be able to pilot for 1 year this resource that the community has identified as being so critical as really just one piece of the crisis part of our mental health system, Bunk said. In an email, Buffalo Police spokesperson Timothy Richards said the department decided not to renew its contract with Endeavor Health Services when it expired at the end of April and started discussion with the county on partnering on a new pilot. Over the course of the contract, the Buffalo Police Department's demand for services grew, and the department decided it would seek other options that would lead to increased coverage from a more established and reliable partner, Richards said. Endeavor Health Services had worked with the unit from its inception in 2020. In its request for proposals, the county says it is looking for a service provider to offer support and follow-up services for the specialized unit and to engage in joint responses when appropriate. However, the officers will remain the primary responders to all mental health-related police calls. Clinicians will offer support in crisis management, de-escalation, and diversion from arrests when possible, while also following up with people to connect them to community-based support systems. Operators will be required to have at least 2 licensed clinicians available to work with officers on calls from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday. The department receives an average of 18 mental health-related calls each day, according to the RFP. Clinicians will work on follow-up calls with people contacted by the unit when not out on calls. The selected contractor will be responsible for submitting documentation on all calls, track outcomes for diversion and follow-up care, and connections to community support. Police Commissioner Erica Shields declined to be interviewed for this article through Richards so as not to influence the county's selection process, he told the News. The program, which has been paid for by the city since it began in October of 2020, has worked to divert hundreds of mental health calls, resulting in people being kept out of hospitals and jail. The Commissioner and the Behavioral Health Team leadership support the conditions and parameters laid out in the request, Richards said. Responses to the request for proposals are due August 28th, and Bonk said her department hopes to have the selected provider approved by the Erie County Legislature by the end of the year.
In educational news from the city of Buffalo, Da Vinci students plead for a new home, saying, "Our physical environment is holding us back." Soon-to-be Leonardo da Vinci High School senior Jordan Livingston was not shy in telling the Buffalo School Board last week about the opportunities her class has missed the last 3 years. Livingston was in the first class of Da Vinci students at School 8, a long mothballed school on East Utica Street that had been rapidly rehabilitated in the summer of 2023 with $12 million in non-reimbursable district funds to accommodate the students after the college preparatory school's lease expired at Duville University. Honestly, we've gotten pretty good at making do, Livingston said after 3 years of what was called a temporary site, but students shouldn't have to spend 4 years making do. Livingston was one of 7 Da Vinci students who shared their frustrations over a saga that began with excitement for a promising future destination at SUNY Buff State's Buckham Hall, where students would learn on the university campus and be able to access cultural gems such as the Birchfield Penny Art Center, the Whitworth Ferguson Planetarium, and Rockwell Hall. Hope has waned in the 3 years since, despite multiple pleas from the school's leadership. Present conditions on East Utica have several students willing to accept a more suitable building, even if it's not physically connected to a local higher education entity as Da Vinci's mission warrants. I need you to take a look at the conditions that you're expecting us to prepare for college, said Asa Phillips, a junior, this fall. We've gotten mail that says we have lead in our walls. We don't have a library. Our auditorium doubles as a lunchroom and a dismissal facility, and our gym is in the basement. These are basic necessities. The student speakers also emphasized the school's limited space has prevented it from hosting graduations, even though the school has fewer than 100 seniors each year. A school should be a place that gives every student the opportunity to learn, grow, and create, added Da Vinci student Eshal Badar. And right now, our physical environment is holding us back. For several students, the desired outcome is fulfillment of the district's promise of Buckham Hall. For other speakers, it's any building in which they can have the space to enjoy the high school experience. Interim Superintendent Ebony Prophet Bullock said a spirit of compromise would be necessary between the needs of the district and Da Vinci, but she was hopeful an end product could satisfy both. Together, we're going to make a great collaboration, she said. We're going to make a great agreement, and we're going to have a premier place for our family at Da Vinci.
Well, next we have news from East Aurora, and that is that Knox Farm State Park is being overrun by deer.
Oh, no.
Hunters could soon change that. Just how many deer are there in Knox Farm State Park in the town of Aurora? A March 2025 Knox Farm Deer Pellet survey conducted by the state estimated a population of 26 to 30 deer per square mile, most of them females or fawns, which indicates a rapidly growing population when experts suggest that a healthy population for that amount of space would be 8 deer. State and local officials have decided something has to be done about that. The State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation is planning to institute a deer management program that includes recreational hunting in the park. A virtual public session about the management program is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. September 1st, during which more details will be released. The information session will include a presentation about deer impacts to the park and the deer management program, followed by a question and answer period. The meeting will be recorded and will be available on the Knox Farm webpage following the meeting. Other options being considered include a bait and shoot program. Under the plan for hunting, only bows and arrows would be permitted and would be designated to a sectioned off area of the park. The bait and shoot program was proposed in a joint announcement on Facebook by the East Aurora Village Board and Aurora Town Board. Both decisions have come in response to a growing number of human-deer interactions, sparking concern among officials who say that the inflated population is affecting plant life and bringing disease-carrying ticks closer to humans. Landscape is being chewed up, constant deer detritus is everywhere on people's lawns, it's becoming a real nuisance, Village Trustee Ryan Camp said, and furthermore, the anecdotal evidence is very strong that we've seen a stark increase in Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses among town and village residents. Aurora Police Chief Patrick Welsh added that in the last decade, the community has seen a pretty dramatic increase in deer-related car crashes. The town of Aurora has seen a dramatic increase in residential home building on vacant land, Welch said. With that, you decrease the natural habitat for deer, so it pushes deer into other areas, and I think that's largely what we're seeing. Aside from the effect on humans and the local ecosystem, the state parks office noted, quote, there is poor nutritional health within the deer population, unquote, because the land does not have the carrying capacity to sustain their numbers. State Park spokesperson Angela Berti said public information and session on bow hunting is meant to, quote, explain why this is necessary and give the community a chance to ask questions. It's also an opportunity for potential hunters to learn more about hunting in an area that has previously not been open for hunting. The village and town are accepting feedback from residents on the bait and shoot proposal at deer@townofaurora.newyork.gov. Camp said the feedback so far has been balanced, with some residents pointing out increases that they've noticed in the presence of deer and tick-borne illnesses.
Well, we move from deers to cows now, as the Dairy Co-op is eyeing help with the project's cost on the rise. Rising expenses are confounding the region's largest dairy cooperative as it seeks to complete a significant expansion in West Seneca. That's been in the works for over 2 years, with at least another year before it's done. That's why Upstate Niagara Cooperative is also asking Erie County Industrial Development Agency for additional tax breaks. Upstate, which is now operated as UNC Dairy, is building a manufacturing and storage facility at 3200 North America Drive, adding 181,293 square feet of space to its existing 222,851 square foot warehouse that was built in 2005. That's up 9% from the previous plan a year ago. The addition will be used to make its dairy products, as well as to store finished goods, ingredients, and packaging. Upstate, which is owned by 260 dairy farms, produces milk, cream, ready-to-drink beverages, yogurt, and other products under the Upstate Farms, Bison, Intense Milk, Milk for Life, Spring Farms, Gold Cow, and Valley Farms brands. The Lancaster-based company previously announced that it would double annual production of both Greek and Icelandic yogurt and cottage cheese in order to meet rising demand, allowing it to produce 60 million more pounds and 66 more pounds respectively. The cost of the ambitious project has soared to $315 million, even as its scale has been reduced in order to save money. The project was first proposed in 2024 as a 250,000 square foot addition, which would have more than doubled the physical size of the entire operation. At that time, it was projected to cost $150 million, so Upstate obtained $9.9 million in tax breaks from the ECIDA. However, the cost of both construction and new equipment rose substantially because of higher material expenses and more precise information. And Upstate had to factor in extra unexpected expenses like wetlands and a new $1.5 million sewer line. So officials scaled back the project scope to 165,834 square feet, reducing the amount of space to just what they needed now instead of building extra space for future growth. They also dropped plans to construct a fully automated cooler, which meant the cooler would not need to be as large. Even so, the cost increased 66% to $255 million as of last summer, and the ECIDA last September approved an extra $2.1 million in tax breaks for a new total of $12 million. Now, Upstate has another problem. The company has to spend $30 million to add linear generators to the project to power the expansion because of a lack of electricity. Except for the $3 million in grants from Empire State Corp., it has funded all of this with bank loans. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio service, and the time now is 15 minutes after the hour.
Ted, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that even though the game was on Saturday, we could still declare this Victory Monday.
All right, let's go. Yay!
And so we'll turn to sports, and the first headline is Catherine Fitzgerald's column, and she says, in his second stint as a Buffalo wide receiver, Sherfield wants the team to put trust in Trent. Buffalo Bills wide receiver Trent Sherfield Sr. is no stranger to dirty work. Now, in his 9th season in the league, the once undrafted Sherfield has been able to carve out roles for himself again and again. He's done so for 6 different teams, including second stints in Buffalo and Arizona. It was not a surprise when the Bills brought him back this season. On Saturday, Sherfield got to showcase a little more of his offensive skills, but he's been comfortable leaning on special teams throughout his career, and that wasn't always the case. I think as I've gotten older in my career, I realized that, embracing both will create longevity for me, Sherfield said. And so it wasn't even until I was in Minnesota in 24 where I was really like, you know what? Let me really embrace this. Let me really embrace what it means to be a blocker and a receiver, special teams guy, and being able to fill on all 3 spots. And it worked out great. In the Bills' 31-7 preseason win over the Cleveland Browns on Saturday, Sherfield had 4 catches on 4 targets for 54 yards. Bills quarterback Kyle Allen connected with Sherfield on all 4 passes, including 18-yard and 17-yard catches to sandwich the game's lightning delay. Trent's always been great, Allen said. I think everyone in this building has a lot of trust in Trent, and he just gets open, makes contested catches. I feel great throwing him the ball. I know he's going to protect it, and it's just hard work, man. So it's awesome to see him have success. Sherfield was adamant that he didn't go into the preseason game trying to prove anything. But what did he show? I think, honestly, it's just that I can still do it, Sherfield said. You can turn on the tape from years prior, and I've been able to do it in regular season games, preseason games, and I think for me, just being in the moment and just taking it day by day, not worrying about what's ahead and not worrying about, what's going to happen, but just worrying about what I can control, that's all I've been doing. Roster cuts are looming, and the Bills remain banged up at wide receiver. When the Bills brought back Sherfield on a 1-year deal in March, he seemed like a bubble player. Now, he could be playing his way onto the opening day roster. He's been making plays, and I think he has a comfort level understanding his role in the league, Bills coach Joe Brady said. You see a guy go out and make plays like that, receive and then draw the penalty, and making tackles in special teams, he's such a selfless football player. When Sherfield entered the league in 2019 with the Arizona Cardinals, he was under the wing of Hall of Famer Larry Fitzgerald and in the same rookie class as Christian Kirk, a close friend of Josh Allen. Sherfield absorbed all he could from them, focusing first on his opportunities as receiver. But Sherfield also worked with special teams coordinator Jeff Rogers, who this offseason made the move from Arizona to Buffalo. He was able to use special teams to secure his spot on the team, and that opened his eyes to what special teams could mean to a player like him.
Our next article talks about the other half of that passing duo. As Jay Scarsy writes this headline, Battle for the Bills quarterback 2 may be settled with Allen 2's impressive showing. The Buffalo Bills have maintained all summer that it's an open competition between Kyle Allen and Shane Buechele to be the backup quarterback behind Josh Allen. After Saturday's 31-7 preseason victory at the Cleveland Browns Huntington Bank Field, it's possible that the team may be nearing a decision. Kyle Allen was impressive in the first half, going 10 of 12 for 128 yards and one touchdown pass, a 138.9 passer rating, and leading the Bills to a 14-7 halftime lead. That came a week after Allen went 14 of 16 for 108 yards in the preseason opener against the Carolina Panthers. The Bills rested most of their projected starters on Saturday, following a joint practice with the Browns that was held on Thursday. That included Josh Allen, who played against the Carolina Panthers in the first preseason game. Kyle Allen led 2 touchdown drives against the Browns, the first of which was interrupted by a lightning delay that came just 1 minute and 49 seconds into the first quarter. The last 2 words anyone involved in preseason football, players, coaches, fans, or the media in attendance, want to hear are undoubtedly weather delay. The game resumed at 2:15 p.m. after an almost hour delay. When play resumed, the Bills opened the scoring drive with a 1-yard touchdown run by Ray Davis. He was stopped for no gain twice in a row on plays from the Browns' 1-yard line, but the third time was the charm. The score was set up by a defensive pass interference penalty that covered 32 yards and came when Browns linebacker Nathaniel Watson interfered with Bills tight end Jackson Hawes in the end zone. Kyle Allen went for 2 of 2 for 35 yards on the drive. I was just so proud of the guys, just in general, of our team, our quarterbacks, head coach Joe Brady said. We've had rain since the first day of training camp. We knew we were going to play in these types of conditions and then a weather delay. So everything that we kind of embody and talk about, it was great to kind of see it in action. Kyle Allen has bounced around the league, playing for 6 different teams. This is his second stint in Buffalo after spending the 2023 season as Josh Allen's backup. I think I've slowly gotten better year after year for the past 4 or 5 years, Kyle Allen said. It's tough to bounce around to a bunch of places, but I mean, that's the job of a backup quarterback. And I feel like I'm just continuing to work on the little things in the game, trying to master the game and master defenses. Preseason is about executing, playing within the offense, and trying to score points. And it's been fun. I've got a great crew on offense, and that makes it easy on me. And some notes from the game. First, Hardman had an up and down game. Kyle Allen's only 2 incompletions came on throws to Mecole Hardman, both of which were on third down, and the receiver having a chance to catch them. After those 2 early drops, Hardman made amends late in the second quarter when he took a short throw from Kyle Allen and danced his way into the end zone. Could have been a better performance. Had a drop over the middle in a 2-minute situation, he said. It was an okay game. I blocked okay, but there are a couple of those plays I wish I could have back. That's what it's all about. Keep playing, Hardman said. You still want to have those back because it's an aspect of my game that I want to improve to make those plays. Second, Hamlin makes a big play. 6th-year safety Damar Hamlin intercepted Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders in the second quarter, capitalizing when linebacker Joe Andreessen deflected the pass. The pick was made at the Bills' 9, taking potential Cleveland points off the board. Third, Anderson. The ongoing competition for the starter at left guard continued Saturday. Alec Anderson got the start ahead of Austin Corbett. The other starters on the offensive line included tackle Tylen Grable, right tackle Jude Bowery, and center Cedric Van Pran Granger, and right guard Jamar Reed-Adams. Starting center Connor McGovern has been out with lower body injury since the team's blue and red practice on August 8th. And fourth, Bass bounces back. Against the Browns, kicker Tyler Bass was perfect on 4 extra points and made a 52-yard field goal in the third quarter. It was not a good joint practice for Bass against the Browns the other day, as the Bills' 7th-year kicker missed 2 field goal attempts during the practice, both wide right from 35 and 45 yards. That caused quite a bit of consternation on social media about the position of kicker. And finally, a total of 12 players didn't dress. A week after having just 4 players not in uniform for the preseason game against Carolina, the Bills tripled that number against the Browns, having 12 of their potential starters not in the game.
Well, next we have some tennis news from the Cincinnati Open. And in the first All-Americans Women's Single Championship at the Cincinnati Open since 1970, the world's number 3 Jessica Pegula struggled to keep up with number 4 Coco Gauff and lost 6-2, 6-4 in Sunday's final in Mason, Ohio. The 22-year-old Gauff, securing her second Cincinnati title, quickly established a 5-0 lead in the opening set, breaking twice and capitalizing on her compatriots' double faults. Pegula, the Buffalo native who ousted defending champion Iga Swiatek on Saturday, broke Gauff without dropping a point at 5-2, but was unable to recover from the early deficit against the power of world number 4's forehand. Gauff, building momentum ahead of the U.S. Open, rapidly took a 3-0 lead in the second set, breaking in the second game while taking advantage of the 30-year-old's failed returns. After the match, Gauff was very complimentary of her fellow American. "I'd like to thank Jess. When I first came on tour, she was one of the few players that was nice to me," Gauff said. "That's always stuck a long way with me and my family. I have so much respect for you." Pegula was through to the Cincinnati final in Cincinnati for the second time in 3 years, previously losing the championship to Ariana Sabalenka in 2024. Gauff won the Cincinnati Open for the first time in 2023 at 19 years old. Pegula was seeking her third title in 2026. She previously won at Charleston and Dubai this season and was also seeking her 12th career title.
And taking a look at some news in Major League Baseball, Arizona Diamondbacks second baseman Ketel Marte, who gained attention recently by not showing up for a game, was back in the news for appearing in images on social media at a casino while his team was playing. The 3-time All-Star is not available to play after going on the 10-day injured list on Thursday due to left knee inflammation. On Friday night, while the Diamondbacks were playing the Cincinnati Reds at Chase Field in Phoenix, multiple videos and photos online showed Marte across town at a roulette table in the casino at Talking Stick Resort. Arizona manager Torey Lovullo was asked after Friday's game about Marte and said injured players are not required to attend games. "He's free to do whatever he wants," Lovullo said. "That's how I look at it. As long as he wakes up tomorrow morning and posts and gets his work done at Salt River, which I am certain he will do, that's all that matters to me right now." It was a different story when the week started with the 3-time All-Star not showing up for the team's game Monday against the host Boston Red Sox. The 32-year-old Marte exited the Diamondbacks on August 14th with a knee soreness and sat out the next day. He returned to play second base on August 16th and traveled with the team for the Red Sox series to Fenway Park. The drama began when Marte did not report to the ballpark on August 17th, leaving Lovullo in the dark about his lineup until 20 minutes before game time. The team put Marte on the restricted list. Arizona then reinstated Marte and transferred him to the 10-day IL list on Thursday. Marte and his agent Espinosa Dash, met with Lovullo and Diamondbacks general manager Mike Hazen on Thursday in Scottsdale, Arizona, to discuss what transpired in the wake of Marte's absence last Monday. And finally, the stat of the day is 0. The Reds' J.J. Bleday hit for the cycle and drove in 3 runs Saturday night in Phoenix. Teammate Ellie De La Cruz was a triple short of the cycle, finishing with 4 hits. No team in Major League Baseball history has ever had 2 players hit for the cycle in the same game, and that record still stands strong today.
Well, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. It's 30 minutes past the hour, and time now to turn to Asking Eric and get life's problems solved. And the first headline is, Cousin an excellent cook but hosts in a filthy house. Dear Eric, I have a first cousin who is a very good cook and likes to invite people over for dinner. She has a good job in the medical field. She's not overly depressed. The problem is the housekeeping and upkeeping of the kitchen. Filthy doesn't describe the full essence of the situation. There is hoarding, litter boxes that haven't been cleaned for days, in parentheses, weeks, an overflow of trash spilling into the walkway of the kitchen, food in opened and unopened containers across all counters, etc. The bathroom is also often filthy. You need to experience it to completely understand. She is relentless in the invites. Pleasant responses of, let's eat out, or how about you coming here, are met with deaf ears. The requests continue. We have run out of polite and pleasant responses. What is the best way to let her know that we cannot eat or visit in her home, but enjoy her company outside of her home? Signed, Lost My Appetite. Dear Appetite, it may not be the most pleasant conversation, but it will help her if you're direct about the issues you're having. It sounds like there's a reason for concern about the state of her home. Your description is not of a place that's healthy for her or others. So, your best recourse is to tell her that she's a very good cook and you enjoy her company, but you have concerns about her home and you're wondering if she shares those. Try to use specific examples instead of painting with a broad brush. Excuse me. Ask her if she's noticed the same thing and if this is an area which she could use support. It may be that no one has ever pointed this out to her directly. She could very well know about her hoarder tendencies and other cleanliness issues, but not know how to address them. So, the conversation with you also serves as an offer. There is help available. If accepted, it will make her life easier and make it easier for people to accept her invitations. Dear Eric, my mom is 90. I'm the youngest of 2, and my mom has always preferred my sibling to me. I basically raised myself and had to accept that I did not matter. My mom and sibling now have health issues, and I am left to deal with my mom, who still does not like me. She says mean and hurtful things, but still expects me to deal with things for her. Short of walking away, how do I deal with such a parent? She cannot afford a paid guardian. Signed, Not the Favored Child. Dear child, I'm sorry the effort you're putting in with your mother is being met with unkindness. Set a clear boundary with her around communication. Tell her what kind of talk you won't put up with, and if she crosses the line, remind her that this is not how things are going to go. You don't have to resort to threats, but be firm. I am taking care of you, and I will not be spoken to like that. In non-urgent situations, you can step away if she refuses to relent, regroup, or come back at another time. Depending on what kind of care your mother needs, there may be other options for assistance beyond a paid guardian. Think about what you can entrust to others. Talk to your mother's health care provider, or consult with your local Department of Aging about resources that can give you some space. Dear Eric, I can empathize with Stuck Wife, who wrote about wanting to travel but feeling stuck at home with a husband suffering from neuropathy. I am a caregiver for my sister who's in a wheelchair, and felt disappointment in not being able to go to all the places I wanted to visit for so many years. However, I found that many of the places I've wanted to visit have now become wheelchair accessible, and we've been able to travel, though it does take an extra step of calling ahead to make sure that certain points of interest are wheelchair accessible. If the letter writer's husband is willing to rent an electric wheelchair or scooter, perhaps Stuck Wife can still travel with her husband. No, she won't be able to climb Mount Everest with him, but she can still possibly kayak, raft, zip line, visit museums, or lie on the beach or next to her at a pool drinking wine and watching the sun go down. There's always a way to make it work. Signed, Seeing the World. Dear World, yes, this is a great point. Changes to physical mobility may impact how we engage with the world, but they do not necessarily mean that the world is completely cut off.
Next in Life Features, we have an article that's entitled Fair Fight, and it's about why it could soon be harder to see the full price of a plane ticket while you're shopping. Travelers are accustomed to seeing an all-inclusive price for airfare when browsing for flights online, but they may soon need to read the fine print before purchasing, as Washington is trying to change disclosure requirements. The Department of Transportation proposed new regulations last month that would allow airlines to highlight fares without individual components such as taxes. The change could mislead consumers, marketing and aviation experts said. The existing guidelines were established by the Obama administration to protect consumers from deception. The Trump administration thinks the policy is too rigid. The total airfare would still have to be listed in some manner under the new rules. These proposed changes would ensure greater flexibility in how airfare is displayed, the Department of Transportation said in its proposal. And here are a couple of questions about that new proposal. First, how would prices be advertised under these new regulations? The new rules would allow airlines to advertise components of airfare more prominently than the total price. This could mean that the first listed price could be missing major components. Some critics of the policy warned that airlines could misuse this freedom to entice customers with low base fares and high fees. The airlines would have more leeway in terms of showing the price of the actual flight compared with the additional taxes and fees, said Stephen Pratt, professor of university at the Central Florida Rosen College. Transparency in pricing is a good thing for consumers, and it gives the power back to the consumers. Shoppers would see the total price before they pay for a ticket, but it may be at the last minute. Depending on the airline, the difference between the base fare and the total fare can be large. For example, a recent search showed a base fare for JetBlue from Los Angeles to London at $21. The base fare did not include $328 in taxes and fees. $290 of those dollars come from a carrier fee. At the end of the day, you're going to pay the final price, and you're going to see that the final price, but you won't get a lot of frustration because you're going through the whole decision process. Next question. How could this change affect flight shopping? The Department of Transportation's new regulations could make it more complicated to shop for flights and compare prices, Farrell said. With a total price being displayed up front, it's easy to compare fares within an airline or use a tool such as Google Flights to see fares across different airlines. If the total price is not prominently displayed or isn't showing until the end of the purchasing process, consumers may have to go through the checkout process for several flights just to see which is the cheapest. This just adds confusion to what they're trying to navigate in the sense of looking for price. It seems like making an already confusing consumer decision even less transparent. They are trying not just the best deal, but also the best route, and maybe you have an airline preference. Next question, what are the existing regulations? Airline advertising is currently governed by a full fare advertising rule that was established in 2012. It prohibits prominent display of individual fare components and requires the full price to be shown right up front, including in the first instance following the itinerary search. The full fare advertising rule was intended to prevent consumer confusion or deception by advertisements of low base fares that did not reflect the total cost of the air transportation. This is not the first time that lawmakers have tried to soften this rule. In 2023, representatives on the House of Transportation Committee proposed a bill that would have allowed airlines to prioritize advertisement of the base fare. And finally, how are people in the airlines responding? Individuals and consumer advocates are wary of these changes. Southwest Airlines is definitely against changing the rules. The Department of Transportation recently extended the public comment period for its proposal to August 21st. Southwest had requested the extension along with the Trade Association of American Airlines. An entire generation of consumers has shopped and purchased air travel under this system, and we believe a change could be extremely disruptive. To allow stakeholders adequate time to consider the impact of these potential changes, we believe that it's in the public interest to grant interested parties additional time to provide for comments. The proposal garnered more than 1,200 comments from groups and members of the public.
Well, our next story is headlined Well Vetted, inside the factory where Chevrolet assembles its iconic sports car. A high-pitched roar of a world-class performance engine echoes through the Bowling Green assembly plant every few minutes. The mechanical rasp lingers in the air, signifying the completion of another Chevrolet Corvette. A quality tester looks both ways, ensuring nothing impedes the path as the newest 2027 Chevrolet Corvette Grand Sport is driven off the assembly line. The wide-body sports car is hand-polished before it passes through a final inspection, its flawless paint job reflected in the room's LED lights beaming like a jewel under a spotlight. Soon, the Corvette will be on its way to a dealership where its custom features will catch the eye of a driver eager to join the ranks of sports car owners. At a time when American automakers like Ford or General Motors, which produces the Corvette, are prioritizing production of highly profitable gas-guzzling pickup trucks and SUVs, the American-made sports car still commands global attention. And each day, inside the Bowling Green assembly plant, some 1,200 employees spend hours crafting a vehicle that defies much of the utility focus the auto industry has shifted to in the past decade. The Corvette, which was first released in 1953, is one of the last remaining vehicles of its kind made in America. With its two-seat sports car heritage and bespoke assembly, it's the pinnacle of American automobiles that has refused to fade out of fashion for more than 70 years. Through continued evolution, the Corvette, the longest-running continually produced American sports car, has cemented itself in the automotive world and competes on the global stage with European performance cars like Ferrari and Lamborghini, a major pride point for the American employees, automaker, and drivers. I think that the Corvette has been true to its DNA since we started the brand almost 75 years ago, said Megan Daly, marketing manager for Chevy's performance vehicles. It has always been a representation of what General Motors and Chevrolet is capable of, both from a performance on the track and luxury vehicle perspective. At the Corvette plant, unlike most manufacturing facilities where speed of production is the goal, the assembly line trudges along at a pace so slow, workers can comfortably walk back and forth across the line. Mark Gardner, a global supply chain manager with Corvette, said employees at each station along the assembly line spend almost 5 minutes working on a vehicle, intricately connecting its wiring and installing parts by hand, compared to the 60 seconds that other higher volume factories may provide for workers. In a given day, The plant sees about 160 Corvettes completed. For comparison, Chevrolet's best-selling Silverado and the GMC Sierra made at General Motors plant in Michigan will see roughly 1,100 units of the heavy-duty trucks made daily. Every Corvette is made based on a customer or dealer order slip. The Corvette plant does not stockpile vehicles or build high-quantity volumes of specific colors or trim packages, as each vehicle is pre-ordered with customization. With thousands of possible part combinations from right-hand to left-hand drive to exhaust location, paint color, convertible or hardtop, employees are constantly flexing their assembly skills to ensure each car is built to the driver's exact specification. We like to think that we're building the halo for GM, Gardner said. We have lots of fantastic products, but we take particular pride in that we build every single Corvette that goes out into the world. While Corvette isn't the most profitable or most sold vehicle manufactured by GM, Daly said the vehicle represents the cornerstone of the performance car industry.
And in TV news, we have an article here about a new Western. At a time when superhero films have gotten unwieldy, producers of Lanterns decided they wanted to pull back and tell a more intimate story. Their solution? Set it in Rushville, Nebraska. With relatives in Nebraska, co-creator Tom King says setting a series in a vast open space would underscore the power of superheroes, and they'd explode like the dragons in the Game of Thrones, instead of being lost among the chaos, he says. In Nebraska, they'd really stand out. The superheroes are the Lanterns, who are interstellar peacekeepers who are assigned to investigate a murder in Rushville. Hal Jordan, the veteran played by Kyle Chandler, believes it's an extraterrestrial incident. John Stewart, played by Aaron Pierre, is a recruit, not one chosen by a power ring. The new series feels like a season of True Detectives, which could track, because co-creator Chris Mundy worked on Ozark and True Detective. Night Country producer Damon Lindelof, best known for Lost, said it was a relief to work on a show that wasn't steeped in superhero lore. They're human beings first, before they even put on the rings, Lindelof says of the two detectives. Digging into that veteran-newcomer dynamic would give Lanterns a relatable feel. It became obvious really quickly that there was going to be a very cool collaborative process which freed us up, Chandler says. It didn't take long for Aaron and I to find a spot where, okay, that's you, that's me. That's my character, that's your character. And then we started playing back and forth. All the rest of it just fell right into place. Pierre says the two improvised frequently. The magic was already on the page, but they knew we were always going to get from point A to point B. But how we got there, nobody knew, Pierre says. We like to surprise each other, and that permitted us freedom and liberty to do that. Rushville, which is located in the panhandle of Nebraska near South Dakota, was home to King's grandmother. And she would tell me stories of this little town. She rode a horse to school, and there were 3 people in the schoolhouse, and they all knew each other, King says. To me, that was an alien planet. So when we started thinking about this show and people going to an alien planet, it appealed to me. And to put a little bit of my grandmother's magic in it was a bonus, he says. Lindelof says it reads like a classic Western. John and Hal are not quite father and son, they're more akin to brothers. But They're both processing this very complicated relationship with their own dads in partnership with one another. There's no rings, no aliens, no space, no guardians. Then you layer all that stuff in and you make that science, and the genre stuff supports those ideas. While working on Lost, Lindelof found outsiders were eager for an end to the mystery. When are you going to tell us what's going on? Lindelof remembers them saying, but once we started answering mysteries, the show was going down the hill. Watchmen, another of his series, had a 9-episode limit, and that was more manageable. Likewise, Lanterns. Chris's vision for Lanterns was the perfect hybrid of both of those things. It's a mystery, a relationship story, and an end, but the audience is going to be really hungry for more when it ends. Bonus perk. Chandler says Lanterns was his way to get into the ever-popular superhero world. It's a lot of fun, and there's humor in getting older, he says. You get to play out so many things.
Well, next, Ted, we're going to turn to the My View column, and I'm going to say that this column strikes close to home. It's about having bats in your house, and my next-door neighbor recently found that he had about 30 bats in his attic.
Wow.
And he's had it remediated since, but as writer Susan Gianotis says in her headline, living with bats is not easy. 2 years ago, after a week away and a long drive home, I was exhausted and ready for bed when I heard a chirping sound coming from my baseboard electric heater. My cat was pawing at it. I thought it was strange that a cricket had gotten into an upstairs bedroom, but when I shined my phone flashlight into the heater, I didn't see anything. Moments after I turned out the light, I heard something large crawling out of the heater. It was a bat. I had a bat mitigation specialist come to the house. He recommended installing one-way vents. Any bats in the attic could get out but couldn't get back in. I was talked out of it. The thinking was that the bat was probably a one-off and the price of the work was too high. I never found the bat. After spending the night and sleeping in my car, I tried hard not to think about what had happened to it. Fast forward 2 years. It was a typical summer morning. I came downstairs and spotted what I initially thought was one of the dog toys scattered around the room. But no, it was a dead bat. I felt the adrenaline spike and my heart started to pound. I took deep breaths, let the dog out, and went into the basement to feed my loudly complaining cat. And right next to her food dish was what looked like a sock. I knew immediately it wasn't a sock. It was another dead bat. I ran upstairs and called my neighbor Carrie in a panic. She came right over and took pictures and pointed out what looked like blood, concluded that the cat had probably gotten the bat, and then went downstairs to retrieve the second one. Carrie took both bats and kept them at her house until the health department could collect them for rabies testing. I would have to wait for the results, and I was advised to get my cat a rabies booster. When I called the bat remediation specialist again, he told me they had been flooded with calls about bats getting into people's houses. There was another complication because it was maternity season. I couldn't simply have the bats excluded immediately. Young bats still could be unable to fly, and sealing the adults out would leave the pups trapped inside. So now I have to live with the possibility of more bats in my attic, and for the moment, they have legal protections from eviction. I understand why. Bats control insect populations, pollinate plants, and spread seeds. I'm entirely in favor of bats performing these valuable ecological services, but unfortunately, my rational brain and my fear-based lizard brain are two entirely different things. One understands ecosystems and wildlife protection. The other goes straight to every Halloween image of blood-sucking, devilish creatures of the night. I bought thick insulation tape and sealed the two places where the attic can be accessed from inside the house, the hatch in the hallway ceiling, and a small doorway in the hall closet that leads to a lower section of the roof. I have my suspicions about that little doorway. My cat, whom I now call Bat Slayer, has taken to lying directly in front of it. Until one of the one-way vents can be installed, I sleep on high alert, trusting the insulation tape and the bat slayer to hold the line. And what she's saying is exactly right. My neighbor was not able to remediate the bats until just recently when baby season is over, and they put a tube over where the bats are getting in and out with a flapper in there so the bats can leave, but the flapper closes and won't let them back in. And so, right next door.
Some good common sense and advice. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for August 24th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ed Howard
and Ted Jackie. We thank you for listening and hope you have a wonderful week.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.